welcome everyone to another broadcast of The Soul of the Everyman on the ArtistFirst radio network. All past broadcasts are podcasts. Pick them up at ArtistFirst.com. We welcome your questions and comments. Please use DJ at ArtistFirst.com. And now here they are, your hosts, Michael and Margaret Lyons.
And thank you very much, C-Man, and I am Michael Lyons.
Mm-hmm. And I'm Margaret.
And tonight's show is brought to you by Neuralink.
Stop.
The better brain people.
Oh, goodness.
You know, that thing works.
It works.
It works. The first human brain implant was done in a guy who's either a paraplegic or a quadriplegic, I forget which, and he's having a blast with it.
Oh, that's wonderful, though. You know? So he's there.
He's able to do all kinds of manipulation using his neural link.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Purposes like that is just amazing.
Well, that's not the focus of our show. The focus of our show is, it's sort of one of our favorite topics. It's consciousness in one regard, but we are going to do something crazy town and begin with the quote.
Okay.
Because it's very generic, I guess.
Okay. Well, it will set the tone.
It'll set the tone. So you ready out there? Get relaxed. We're going to set the tone.
Okay. All righty. The tricky part about EMF, though, is its interaction with the human brain. Electromagnetic fields affect our perception, as does infrasound and seismic activity. This is Zach Bagans.
No, it's Baggins. As in Bilbo.
Zach
Baggins.
Baggins?
Bagginses.
He's a Bagginses?
He's a Bagginses. I have no idea if that's true. He looks he could be a hobbit. Anyway, so EMF, which is electromagnetic force, just to make sure that people know the abbreviation.
Right.
We bring this up in honor of the gigantic G47 solar storm we just had.
Or G5, yes.
G5, which I think is still ongoing.
Mm-hmm. Well, the solar activity has been ongoing on and off for a few weeks now.
Yeah.
And it's because it was a G5 that it made the news.
News.
But
and there have been a lot of weirdnesses going on. We had a somewhat significant, although no one in California would have noticed, earthquake in New Jersey.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There have been tornadoes all over the darn place.
Right.
Solar storms.
Lots of solar storms.
Dogs and cats living together.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Been an unusual year. Anyway, so we are going to dedicate tonight's show to consciousness and how it's affected by electromagnetic activity. And yes, the solar storm is a unique, or somewhat unique, it's not really a unique event, but it's a somewhat unusual event. But if you put it in context, maybe the best place to jump off here is to say that what we think of as, or what most people think of as their seat of consciousness. If you ask somebody that question, they're going to say, "Well, it's the brain. You know, that's where everything happens. If you affect the brain, you know, you seem to lose consciousness, you get knocked in the head, etc." But very recently, and by recently I mean in the last 5 or 6 years, there's been a lot of work done exploring the deep structures of the brain and the actual synaptic interface. And when you get right down to it, the synaptic interface is interfacing really at the quantum level. It's an order of magnitude finer, maybe a couple of orders of magnitude finer than, let's say, a transistor junction, which is already extremely small. And at that level, and this is coming from people as august as Roger Penrose and many, many others, at that level you cannot discount quantum effects.
Right.
So a lot of very good science has come out of that research to show that the brain is much more like a radio receiver or a transducer, if I can use that language. And what I mean by that is that the brain is more of a way of having something which is non-physical, let's just say it in these terms, interact in a physical environment. And you say, well, okay, that never happens. Well, it happens all the time. Non-physical things, electromagnetic energy, for argument's sake, is a non-physical thing, affect the physical all the time. Every time that you see sunlight, coming down to the Earth and warming the planet, that is in essence an electromagnetic energy, a non-physical thing. It's an energetic projection, in essence, a medium which is energy which is traveling through a medium, through a field, that then interacts with what we call matter. Now, there's a lot of terms that we throw around here. The differences between matter and energy are actually very fungible, but we're not going to get into that in any great detail. But non-physical things interact with the physical, what we call sort of the matter-ish kind of stuff, all the time. Now, one thing that's slippery about consciousness is that we really don't know what it is. There's no person, no one on Earth today that understands and can point to consciousness, where it actually happens, where it actually occurs. And one of the reasons that we can't do that is that there doesn't appear to be any mechanism within what we call the brain that would be the seat of consciousness. Yes, you can see tons of electromagnetic electrical activity, and you can affect the brain in all kinds of ways, with light, with EMF, with all kinds of energetic emanations. And these do have an effect on the person. If you strike someone in the head, they go unconscious. If you stimulate very finely various areas of the brain, you can elicit all kinds of different effects. Neuralink, which is why I mentioned it, is in essence it's a electromagnetic pathway from a computer to something which is more like an organo-electromagnetic device, which is the brain. And it allows that interface to happen. Interestingly enough, Neuralink is an interesting analog, Margaret, of what the consciousness would be doing as it sort of maps itself into a physical analog, which is the brain, and then into the matter-ish universe that we exist in here. All that is to say that at the level of consciousness, the interface is really much lower than the synapse, much lower than the electrochemical reactions we can see as a result of electrical activity moving back and forth in the brain. Consciousness is below all that, or really, let's say, outside of all that.
All right. Yeah, I was going to say, what do you mean by below all that?
Well, it's at a much finer structure level than we can see in this gross sort of electro-organic interface.
Okay, so what you're trying to say is it's more foundational.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
By below, I mean underpinning it all. Foundational is a much better word.
Mm-hmm. Well, the overall, because I think of consciousness more, as you said, it's outside, but it's the grid work in which all that interaction of information is getting passed from one's experience to your person or soul or spirit, and recording that interaction, whatever that interaction may be, the process. The soul itself is here for the experience of what it is to live down here. And that connection is much more, as you said, than just the physical brain itself, because that's what a lot of the scientific community would like to say, is that it's just strictly a brain thing. But it's not.
No.
There are many things that happen that are outside the physical brain. And I think I had made this point the last session we had, that our experience with the world can be typified by how we receive the information. In other words, extending our hand into sunlight and then trying to understand the sunlight according to how it affects the skin. It's all a surface description as opposed to actually analyzing what light itself and the light of the sun actually is. And the different aspects of the light. You know, we're talking at this point, there's a lot of magnetic fields that are also involved when the light hits the earth. But to understand that this is, as a human, this is what we do. We observe the effect on if it's our skin or the sound or the smell, on our own senses, try to analyze it, and then bring, how do I say this, the scientific method. You're trying to find commonalities and then extract theories and eventually get to a law that is a constant on what this particular process is or may be. And that's fine. That's exactly why we're here, is to do that interaction. But to say only that, what's real is, well, my skin is feeling warm from the sun, therefore that's what the sun is. It just warms my skin. It's like, no.
It's a true statement, but not a complete statement.
Right.
And, people, I said this to someone the other day, interestingly enough, it came back in this context. I said exactly that to them. I said, what you've just said is absolutely true, but incomplete. Mm-hmm. And they were confused. They said, what do you mean? If it's true, it's true. I said, yes, things can be absolutely true, and yet not a full description, mm-hmm. or really a full understanding. And I think, once you understand, once you kind of bring that and internalize that and say, well, yes, what I know right now, I can depend on it, let's say, being true. If I grounded it and I have it in facts and I've kept myself, sort of away from distractions, I say, well, this I know to be true. But truth and complete understanding are not congruent. They're not the same. They're not the same thing.
Right.
So then people say, well, then I have my truth and your truth and the other guy's truth. And that's a bastardization of the word truth, because what they're saying is that my complete understanding is real to me and your complete understanding is real to you. And what the actual best way to say that is that all of you have a piece of the complete understanding, a piece of the truth. And you can then say, well, my truth is better than this guy's truth, and that's where you go wrong.
Right.
You know, all those truths can be considered at some point. It's in some way equal, but the best truth is to say, I don't know the full truth. That's the best truth.
You don't know the fullness of what the reality is. You are perceiving your piece of reality. You know, it's again, you're going back to that story of the elephant and the three blind men.
Exactly.
You know, what you're perceiving, depending upon what part of the elephant you happen to be exploring, is true for you, yes. But it's still an elephant that you're only describing one part of it. And if we all make allowances for that, you know, everyone's got a piece of the wholeness of what the world actually is. It allows room for growth.
It's the basis of the scientific method. That's another thing people don't understand when they say, well, let's rely upon the science. Science is not there to be relied upon. True scientific method is you extrapolate from what you believe to be true, with the caveat that if reality disagrees with what you believe to be true, you must immediately and forthrightly disregard and get rid of, or modify, really, what you believe to be true. Well, because reality wins, always.
It's accepting the fact that you were wrong in the absolutism of your statement. And people don't want to admit that maybe they were wrong.
Well, and that's when people say rely upon the science, they really don't understand what science means.
Right.
And nor do they understand when science takes as its root principle that we are all feeling parts of the elephant, that in fact this is merely a description of what we can perceive, and that with greater information comes a new description. Hence, you know, when you have the James Webb Space Telescope, the JWST, finding out new things about the very earliest times in the universe that we couldn't perceive before. And people are saying it's overturning science. And I say, no. It's doing exactly what science has always been doing. If you're really doing science, is you're saying, I think I've got it all figured out, but let's go look more anyway. And then when we look more and we realize that, you know, 13.5 billion years as the age of the universe might be wrong, maybe by a lot. You don't say, gosh, no, I'm going to stick my fingers in my ears and go, blah, 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 the 13.8 is exactly right. You just go, wow, we might need a new theory. And you toss the old one, or at least you very seriously consider that maybe it was wrong. And then you go looking for confirmation, or you say, oh no, we were right in the beginning and this is just some sort of an anomaly. But that willingness is important, really important.
Well, you have the exploration. If you understand what you're here to do is experience the exploration. You weren't here to dictate the laws. And that's a very interesting thought, is that humanity in general wants to dictate the laws. And once it's dictated, then you're not supposed to change it at all. But that's not real.
No.
And kind of interesting, because is it coming from the fact that we're just creatures of habit, or is it because we just want to be right?
I think the latter.
Oh, okay.
No, I think that's because people who say rely upon the science are really ego-based. What they're really saying is, believe me, I am science. You've probably heard that phrase once or twice lately. And that in and of itself is a deeply flawed position.
Well, it's not really interested in science and the pursuit of truth, of what is truly out there. It's more, well, I'm I'm right and you're wrong. Meh.
Right, and that's an ego-based. Let's drag it back a little bit, though. We just were talking about consciousness and the fact that consciousness it has been shown in very recent science that it may originate at a quantum interface level, and that the brain, our brains, are transducers of consciousness. Now that people say, well, that's wonderful. That means that, we have an extracorporeal existence. Well,
Okay,
where's
wait.
the evidence? Sorry.
All right, I'm going to have you define transducer.
Oh, yeah, I think I began that and we went off on something else.
Yeah, no, you didn't. Let's get it very clear.
So let me back up. So the brain, I said, is a transducer. What I mean by that it's much more simple than the word itself sounds like. Anything which is used to transform one form of let's say energy into another. So that's even too dense. A microphone, the one that I'm speaking on right now, transforms my voice, which can be heard in this room but not across the world, into something different, which we can push through a medium and then turn it on the other side, where you guys are, 1,000,000 miles away or around the corner, into sounds which your ears can hear. Okay. That's the action of two transducers and then something in between, a wire, let's say. It's like a string and two Dixie cups. The Dixie cup that you're holding in your hand and the one that your friend is holding in the other room are both transducers. They take sound and turn it into something else. And that something else is something that can move through the string. And on the other side, it turns back into probably a distorted version of your voice. So a transducer takes something which is in one form and kind of brings it into another.
Mm-hmm.
So the brain, if the earlier science was that the brain is the seat of consciousness, and when you have a brain, you have a consciousness. And it turns out that that's not true. You can have a brain, and the brain just sits there and goes, bleh, I'm a brain. Everything's there except consciousness. It happens all the time. Every time you go to sleep, everything's there except consciousness. Who you are, what you are, is in another existence, another form. There's another even better example of the brain as a transducer. There have been tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of experiences of what people call near-death, NDEs, near-death experiences. In nearly all of these, there's a lot of them that have patterns. There's patterns of what that experience is. But in nearly all of these that have been studied with now our modern instruments, with PET scans and with electroencephalograms and with real instruments that we kind of rely upon, it has been shown that the experiences that were had by a consciousness occurred during times of when the brain, the electromechanical or electrical transducer, could not have been working properly. Right. It didn't have enough blood. It didn't have enough oxygen. It wasn't in any kind of way. It was under the influence of powerful drugs, for argument's sake.
There was no brainwave pattern.
No brainwave pattern. No way for it to function as we understand it functioning. Yet, during that time, the consciousness experienced certain events which were objectively true.
Mm-hmm.
So the consciousness is able to report back on objectively true events which occurred at the same time that the brain, this transducer, was ineffectively off. So this presents a conundrum to those who would say that the brain is the seat of consciousness. If the brain is effectively off, your TV set is off, yet the program still goes on. And somebody can tell you that, well, this and that and this happened with the program. And I said, well, I didn't see it. But it really still happened. And then if you go back and look at that program again, see, there it is. It happened. that's a sort of a flawed analogy, but the point is that the consciousness operated in a perceptual way with reality in absence of this organic, electromechanical, I can't think of the word anymore, transducer. This isn't a one-time event. It's tens of thousands of events. And it's happened to people who quote-unquote know better. Neuroscientists and physicists and people with deep amounts of training, and then have turned around and then researched their own NDEs and many others and gone through this. So the evidence for an extracorporeal existence it's actually very deep. And now the evidence for an energy field, let's call it, which is translating itself into existence through a it's not a chemical electrical reaction that happens inside of a lump of fat in your skull. There are pieces of that whole mechanism which are involved, but they're so incredibly fine, they're down to the quantum level, that they interact with the universe in a way which is not physical. There's and we can get even more deeply into it, but when we look at what we call the universe, we're seeing it through a limited set of senses. We abstract that and talk about all kinds of things which we can't perceive, like light, like all types of electromagnetic phenomena. However, if we go even more deeply into the mathematics and into the abstraction and get purer and purer and farther away from sense and experience, there's a way of looking at the universe which basically says that everything in it is really just one form of energy or of vibration. All of those vibrations at every particular point in space-time add up to what we call the universe. But none of them can be perceived from this, this body and these eyes and these hands. That doesn't negate their reality. And with certain types of instruments, we can show that these types of phenomena actually occur at a level far below our perception. We're already talking basically about angels dancing on the head of a pin. Mm-hmm. And to leap from that to an extracorporeal consciousness isn't much of a leap at all. Mm. It's almost a natural extension. Mm-hmm. And so we get there. That foundational principle is sort of what we are going to talk about in relationship to what's happening in the world today. We had to kind of lay the groundwork, if you will.
Right. No, this is true. Because to be able to see that there is a relationship, or it has been proven that there is a relationship, or an effect of magnetism, or magnetic fields, electromagnetic fields,
right,
upon the human structure, upon the human brain, upon the human body. And as you said, Neuralink is one of the things that has been using these principles in order to help someone begin to perceive, or I know what his main idea was to help the man walk again, mm-hmm. because he's paralyzed. But to understand that there's a baseline that we human beings have been accustomed to for thousands of years, of where the Earth itself is in a magnetic field, and it protects us for the most part from aberrations of influx of CMEs from the sun, or just the radiation that is in space itself. Our physical bodies are not capable of handling that. It destroys our structures, our DNA. And, you know, something as simple as, and it sounds silly, but something as simple as a full moon does a number on people where they're a little bit loony.
Loony is the word, yes.
But seeing what we've been experiencing and what has just passed with the G5 event of the solar storm, the magnetic solar storm, and it hit the Earth to the point where you're seeing the northern lights in like Alabama or Kentucky or...
Yeah, it was really far south, yeah.
Yeah, that was a huge event. And then it has affected a lot of the communication devices that we use. I'm sure it's hitting on a lot of the satellites that are circling the Earth. And we are just thinking in terms of, all the electronic gizmos we use. But you don't think of your own self and your brain as being affected necessarily by this wave of energy coming in. The coronal mass ejection was huge. And we know when radiation hits a human body, there is all kinds of things that the body starts doing. I mean, when our son had to go through radiation in order to try to kill the cancer cells, it was extreme. He had to receive the maximum amount that a human body can take in order to try to get rid of the cancer cells. And outward appearances is just the breakdown of especially fast dividing cells. So it's like the roots of your hair and your skin. I mean, the hair falls out, and then the lining down your esophagus and through your digestive tract. That's all fast dividing cells, and that goes.
Yeah, mucosa, all that.
So to maintain life in a body that cannot digest food, he was on all kinds of IV
nutrition, all that.
To try to maintain some kind of functioning in the body. But that's what we would term an extreme process for extreme conditions. But going back and understanding that your mood, the way you feel, everything starts shifting and changing when the radiation and the magnetic field changes. And you were seeing this week. There were a lot of people in erratic behaviors or decisions, whether it was driving or everyday process. It's like trying to remember, this is what is going on. I'm supposed to be putting this here, but I actually put it there. Why did I do that?
brain fog going on.
Mm-hmm. And that's an interesting point. It's like how much of the brain fog that we're feeling is it influenced by the magnetic changes, magnetic field changes that are going on?
And people say, well, it's very, very small, and it is much smaller than it would be for, let's say, ionizing radiation in Christopher's case, and anybody who's undergoing radiation therapy. And we also live in an electromagnetic universe. There's a lot of things at certain frequencies which are higher in power, cell phones, all this other stuff. But if you look at broadly at the amount of energy that the Earth received in addition to what it normally gets, it was ridiculously high. There are to see the effects of the CME across about 2/3 of the globe, the top third and the bottom third, if you will, of the globe were lit up. The atmosphere was showing effects of ionizing, of absorption of energy and re-radiation as a photon, sort of a ionizing gas going on. There were some beautiful pictures from, NASA and space weather showing the distortion of our Earth's magnetic field. We were caught up in a storm. Now, when you're in a tornado or a hurricane, you see the effects. There's physical effects happening. These electromagnetic effects were orders of magnitude greater, but imperceptible in the arena of sound, or the arena of pressure, or the arena of wind and all the things that we can see moving around us. However, the buffeting that the Earth took and everything on it is perceptible at a functional level. You could feel that there was a little bit of difference in the way that the light was coming through the clouds. You could see the aurora. You could see all these things. You could sense it on various instruments. Margaret mentioned the internet, but the brain itself and that interface at a quantum level is also affected, and there is at least a perceived. I can't say that we have facts on the ground. So if we apply our scientific method, we can't say, well, we have a study this and a study that. No, but at least perceived that there was a tremendous sort of a level of confusion that kind of overcame the area that we were, our Earth and the people upon it. And you saw many, sort of, let's say, apocryphal events. People were doing exactly as you said. They were like in a fog, just driving erratically. People running right through red lights, swerving back and forth on the road. People standing around in stores, just like looking very lost. Just kind of wondering, what do I do now? What's this is all apocryphal. It's all sort of hearsay, if you will. Yet it makes perfect sense from the point of view of what this transducer, which is our brain, was undergoing when all this buffeting was coming in. The effects,
static.
Right? It's basically like static, exactly. The effects of in essence our normal environment were amped up by many times by this large amount of energy coming in. Now, people say, well, yeah, you might have slightly higher incidence of skin cancer in a few years. You might have certain, effects on biological systems and so on. Yes, all those things are true. But in the immediate effect that we saw sort of acutely, is that people were just zonked out.
Yeah. It's amazing. It was really, just speaking for myself, you're waiting at a light, and in Jersey you could make a right on red. Well, I saw somebody make a left on red.
Yeah.
And it was like, thank God there were no cars. But you're looking at it like, what possessed you to go through the red and make a left?
Right, and sometimes you see people are like, people get angry and they do silly things, and you can see that as a one-off. But I saw the same thing. People just literally just not just running a red light, but literally a quarter mile away, just driving right through the red light. It was like, you know that light was red. They're like, nope, just in my brain fog here.
Yeah, no, this gentleman was stopped at the light, and then went, and you were like,
yes, and somewhere in his perception, that light was green.
Either that or his left became his right and his right became his left.
Right.
It was one of those where you're just like, okay, thank you, Lord, and there was no accident.
Yeah.
But it just really random stuff going on.
One thing I want to bring up, you just mentioned the left is right, right is left. There's another sort of thing we were talking about earlier. There's of course the idea of a right brain, left brain, and people talk about the dichotomy between the two. In general, people have shown that the left brain is the more analytical brain, if you will. The left hemisphere is more analytical, and the right hemisphere is more seems to be more of the if you will, the perceptive brain, the more insightful brain, the brain that does more associative things. It's less verbal, it's less analytical, it's more perceptive. And interestingly enough, you think to yourself, well, of the two brains, the ego, the voice that is always talking and always thinking and always analyzing, probably resides more in that in that left brain. And the emotions and the more insightful and perhaps more intuitive resides more in the right brain. And of course, we are a combination of both of those things when people are interacting and with their universe. However, when this sort of CME and this G5 storm came in, I think it suppressed both brains, but the left brain got all fogged up and kind of confused, and the right brain, this happens to people all the time. You're tired, and you go to do something, and your left brain's like, I'm tired, and the right brain takes over and says, I know what to do, and it takes you to the room and the other thing, and it parks you in the middle, and you say to yourself, your left brain suddenly wakes up and says, why are we here? And the right brain goes, see? And you're like, what the hell? Why are we here? What are we doing here? Well, when the left brain gets whacked in the head a little bit by EMF, I think the right brain just says, this is cool, and it goes off, and it takes people in odd directions. Of the two brains, if you will, the two hemispheres, there aren't two brains, but the two hemispheres, the right brain operates better in chaos. Or rather, it's more accustomed to operating in a non-verbal, non-analytical mode, and so it gets you into trouble sometimes. But it also gives you deep insight, and it gives you that sort of perception of the world, the artistic, if you will, the referential, not the referential brain, but rather the intuitive brain, if you will, the intuitive way of thinking of things. And maybe we said this too, that it's more of the way that you can appreciate the moment of now is more of a right brain thing, if you will. The right brain is more in the moment than the left brain's always talking about, well, we should do this tomorrow, we should do that yesterday, and kind of tearing things up into pieces is the left brain's milieu.
Mm-hmm. Well, when you think about it, it'd be interesting if it was possible to observe the brain activity during those times.
Yeah, that's true.
Is it in the present moment, trying to be in the present moment? The one major thing that Tolle always talks about is stopping thinking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And when you're considering that, it's like, okay, so when that stops, does that mean that creative aspect of you steps in? Or is it, because it's supposed to be just pure observation, and you're not really going to be in an emotional state. And that's kind of interesting too, because a lot of people equate the right brain with more of a emotional kind of response. And actually, that part of you is the creative part. And if it stays in the now, then there is a balance point. But it's not strictly reactive. Maybe that's the best way to put it. Because that's what the mind likes to think of when it's the other part. Because people always go mental versus emotional. So they're thinking, well, my left brain is, or my left side of the brain is mental and my right side's emotional. It's like, no. Truth of the matter is, there's a balance point for both of those. It's just that the skill sets of the observation and then the planning of what may be. One brain is better at it than the other, or one hemisphere is better at it than the other. And these are tools that you have to grow in your ability to utilize. Your skill at understanding what each hemisphere actually does can be honed. And as consciousness, you are more than capable of doing this, but you have to be aware of it, understanding what was the assumptions that were made, like what I had mentioned before, mental being the left hemisphere and emotional being the right. It's like, no, that was an assumption.
Too simple, really.
Well, the tendency is to want to make it a quick understanding, put a handle on it so you can manipulate it. And it's like, no, it's much more complex than that. You're actually doing a great disservice to understanding yourself if you do that. You say, oh, well, that's just this. It's like, well, no, it's not.
Yeah. What people also leave out, and there's a tremendous amount of work that's been done on this, is the whole parasympathetic nervous system.
Yes.
Including the mesentery and the vagus nerve and all the cranial nerves and all that. Again, when people say, well, the brain is where the consciousness is, well, in fact, every part of what we call the nervous system, people will say, well, that's just the wires, and that's just this, and that's just that. No, in fact, that's all connected to this gigantic electromagnetic, chemical, organic transducer, which infiltrates all of what we call the body and connects, the digestive system and the autonomic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system, and all these words that the left brain has come up to tear it all into pieces, which is great. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's beautiful. You have to be able to find everything. You have to be able to do everything. Everything's great. But taken as a whole, taken as a gestalt, and said that this transducer into reality, into this physical body, again, none of it is the consciousness. You can't point to, well, this little nerve ending at the bottom of the mesentery is where the consciousness really is. It's in my gut. No. Well, part of it's there.
Right. The analogy I'd like to give is, you have your car, and if you analyzed it, you begin to realize, well, this system connects up to the steering wheel. And when you see how the steering wheel works, it's guiding the car. And the electronics, they come to this point in the car, which is the dashboard. And then all your mirrors, comes to this part. So this part over here has got to be where all the activity is. It's like, well, yeah, but you got to have someone driving the car. It's not just the systems that are put together. And even if you start it, okay, it's humming along, but who's the driver?
Right. Yeah, and that's another interesting analogy about the car and the driver. Is the car is still the car, and still perfectly ready to go and do and everything that it is. When the driver steps out for a minute, the car still exists and the driver still exists.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, the driver can get into another car. So I mean, these analogies start to break down, but you see that it's a very good way of thinking about the transducer. What gets you around town is the car. What
Right.
gets you to live in the universe is the body and the brain and all these other systems. But none of it is the consciousness.
Right. It's the being, the person, which is the key to all this. I
Right.
mean, the car wouldn't exist unless there was a being that decided let's make something.
Well, exactly so. And another analogy of the car is being within the car and going through a storm. Let's say, a terrible snowstorm or a terrible rainstorm. The car is buffeted. The being inside is affected. Your driving gets worse, perhaps. Your ability to see the road gets affected.
Mm-hmm.
Your consciousness is impaired by the conditions of the body or the
Mm-hmm.
car, the conditions of what's going on around you. But yet the consciousness itself is still the same. Why? How do you know that? Here's how you know. The consciousness remains, the being remains the same, even if you lose the ability to see through a damage of the system.
Mm-hmm.
You don't say that the person is now not the same person anymore. The person is the person. The being is the being. The system which allows the being to perceive light through this particular part of the nervous system and these particular systems in the car no longer works. So that portion of experience is denied to the being. But if you were a sighted person up to a certain point and you lose your vision, every memory of sight is still with you.
Mm-hmm.
You know you could see at one point. You know that you can't see now. Those are all parts of your consciousness. Your being, however, somebody would come up to you and say, hey, Fred, how you doing? Well, I'm doing fine. I lost my vision. So you'd say, well, that's still Fred. That's
Mm-hmm.
still, the being is still there. The experience has, of course, limited a portion of the being's ability to interact with the reality that we happen to share down here. Can't see anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But the being is the being. Fred, born blind, is still Fred. Fred, losing his sight at 40, through whatever reason, is still Fred. You
Mm-hmm.
understand? The experiences, you say, well, Fred had this experience or that experience, but Fred had it, you see? We all say it sort of casually. We always refer to the being had an experience. This happened to Fred. But Fred remains Fred. The experiences are Fred's experiences. They belong to the consciousness. They don't form it, if you know what I mean.
Right. No, this is just part of how we interact with this world. This is our part of the elephant.
This is our part of the elephant. And the solar storm affected us all, but it's just another piece of the elephant, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Well, just a larger part of it. Like
Big
what?
piece of the elephant.
Yes, what's going on? Okay. And the sunspots, too. That was amazing.
Yeah, I mean, you bring that up. Several people, and several people that we know particularly well, were saying that you could see the sunspot with the naked eye. I mean, you obviously shouldn't look at the sun, but using an appropriate filter, like a welder's mask or the glasses that you could use to observe the eclipse, you could see the darn thing. That's how big it was.
Yeah.
It was big enough to be seen with the naked eye from Earth, which is approximately 100 million miles away. 100 million miles away. That's a long way.
Right. And I think they said the width of the sunspot was, 12 Earth lengths?
12 Earth widths, or whatever the heck that would be.
12 Earth widths. And the sun itself is
100 and some odd. Yeah.
100 Earth widths.
Yeah.
So roughly 9 or 10% of that base of the sun is in that involved in the CME.
Right.
It's like visibly.
Visibly.
This is our part of the elephant that we're looking at. It's like this.
Right.
We're getting this now.
And the effects upon the Earth were perceptible. The effects on people upon the Earth were more than perceptible. Yet the reason that can all occur is that electromagnetically the transducer was being pushed around.
Mm-hmm. Well, we were, again, our bodies were not built to take that kind of background magnetic field radiation. So it creates a static in the physical brain that we do have, as well as what shift in the magnetic field itself has happened to the human body.
You mentioned shift, and we never got to the shift. But this is, what's happening now is not necessarily random. And we should probably talk about that at another point.
I'd say that's a huge topic too.
The one thing about the soul of the Everyman, we're never done. One of these days we will be done, but who knows when. Anyway, we are done for this hour, I think, because we have to sort of wrap it up. But from the depths of the G5 storm, we survived it all. We're going to mark ourselves safe, and I'm Michael Lyons.
And I'm Margaret. And thank you for listening.